Welcome back, Wonders. It's Naidra. So I've been spending some time playing with the PTR over the past couple of days, and I've had an opportunity to test out a couple of builds, at least with the Sorceress specifically. I'm planning on trying out some of the other characters right after this. But so far, I did get a chance to play around with Lightning Spear, and I gonna say that at the very least we're definitely in trouble with this one. It was such a struggle to get any type of a build going with Lightning Spear to the point where it just does not feel like it's a viable build at all anymore, unfortunately. And honestly, I don't even get what the point of buffing the base Lightning Spear damage is if you can't even really use it in a build. So for all of those of you that like to play Lightning Spear the last couple of seasons, I'm afraid it seems like at this point that is just not going to work unless Blizzard does something to make some changes before they launch the actual season. Now, outside of Lightning Spear, I also was spending a lot of time playing around with the Hydra build, as I'm sure a lot of you guys have, and for those of you that have not had an opportunity to test the PTR, it's probably something that's top of mind. It is something that I will say has been kind of fun to play. I really have been enjoying the idea of having the ability to use a different type of a build that we really haven't been able to use this far. However, even with this, you're not going to be able to do speed farming like what we were doing in the past, and so it does really kind of change the dynamic of the game, and I'm not sure at this point if it's in a positive or negative way. Now, I am a fan of having versatility or being able to use different types of builds. I think it's a lot of fun. I would love to see a Blizzard build come up in the future as well. But for this specific build, it is viable. You are able to go into the pit with this, and without taking on any type of a shatter effect, I was able to get up to pit tier 95. The only crappy part about it is that it does take a while to get through the pit. In fact, I felt like I only had about 4 or 5 minutes left in a pit tier 95 without using any type of shatter. Now, on the flip side of that, I did decide to try Hydra with Shatter, and it is breezing through enemies in pit tiers 100 and even can go up to pit tier 120. But I absolutely hate builds that require Shatter, and specifically because I'd much rather spend more time getting through the pit itself than spending 10 minutes fighting the boss at the end. And it would be debatable whether you can beat it or not at that point. I'm just really not a fan of having to run a Shatter build. That being said, let's take a look at this Hydra Shatter build that I was using for the higher pit tiers. Oh, and as usual, before we dive into the pit, if you guys have not yet subscribed to the channel, please don't forget to do so below. Let's go ahead and dive right in. Alrighty, so for the purpose of this demo, we're just going to jump into a quick pit tier 85. Like mentioned, you definitely can do a much higher level than this, at least at this point, but we're just going to take a look and see how this is going to operate, and then we'll go back to town and I'll show you guys what my gear looks like. I'm not going to do a planner for today just because this is just a PTR. When the actual season comes out, I'll put something together, and I'll also make sure that I put a planner for you guys to use as well. So what we're going to be doing here is we are going to be using Flame Shield and Ice Armor pretty much all of the time. We want to have as many conjurations out as possible, so we are going to be using Familiar, and of course this is the start of the show, so we are going to be using Hydra as well. Now, on top of that, we do have Fireball on our action bar. Fireball does a couple of things. A is it's going to execute enemies when they're below 25%, which is really helpful. And B, it allows us to attack faster, which means we're going to be able to cool down our skills quite a bit faster thanks to our Flicker Step as well. So that being said, let's go ahead and get started. And then, of course, as usual, we are going to be using a teleporting build as well. We want to make sure that we can teleport and move as quickly as we possibly can. But at this point, as you can see, this build is doing billions of damage, and sometimes we even do get into the trillions, which is really nice. But sadly, a majority of that damage is all coming from our shatter effects specifically, which, like I mentioned, is not really something that I'm a big fan of, and mostly because it just makes sure that we struggle with the bosses when we get to the end. Otherwise, it is really fun. It's nice to see them exploding. I do love that effect. I just wish that this would be helpful when we're going up against single targets or bosses as well. Now, if you're somebody that's really good at pulling your enemies, this is going to be so easy and a really quick pit in any of the tiers that you really take on, but that's not really my forte. I do struggle with that a little bit, and I just don't really think it's that amusing when you're running around just trying to pull all of the enemies together. Now, besides just the shatter damage that's doing a lot here, we also are getting quite a bit of damage coming out from our Hydras as well. Hydra is dealing billions of damage on its own, but the shatter, like I mentioned, is what's really pulling all of this together. I did try a different build which does not use shatter, and like I mentioned earlier, I mean, it does do pretty well. It does go all the way up to pit tier 95 and it can handle it, but when I got to pit tier 95 I did feel like I hit a wall to the point where it really took almost the full 15 minutes to be able to complete that pit tier. And based on what I've gathered, it seems like that's kind of where Blizzard wants us, is they don't really want us to be able to handle the highest pit tiers. Alrighty, so now that you guys can see how this works, let's go back to town and I'll show you guys what I've quickly put together here. Now again, keep in mind this is just a tester build, so it's not going to be min-max. Alrighty, so let's take a look at our equipment. Before we jump into it though, I will say there's a lot of problems with the PTR. For those of you that have got to try it out, I'm sure you know exactly what I mean. For everybody else that's not playing the PTR, everything was broken. First of all, there was all kinds of crazy lags that eventually would disconnect me and I just was unable to play it. Other times, I had a really hard time either finding the equipment that I needed from the cheap vendor. He either didn't have it or I had to keep doing it over and over and over again. Sometimes the equipment that dropped from those caches would disappear. It was just a complete nightmare. On top of that, when I went to enchant my items, I was not able to enchant something different. In fact, if you look at the staff here, I enchanted this, I have to say, at least 50 plus times. And every time, the only thing that would come up is lucky hit chance to heal. In addition to that, when I went to go masterwork stuff, I would reset it. And as you can see, we've got way more masterwork on here than we should have. We only should have really one orange item on here. But as you can see, we've got two. Plus, in addition to that, we've got plus 10 Hydra heads. And so ultimately, like I mentioned, masterworking, enchanting, all of that stuff was completely broken. And it just really didn't help to be able to test the build when I honestly don't know what it's really going to look like when the season comes out. That being said, though, we did decide to use a staff with this, and we decided to use the serpentine aspect, which was reworked. And this is really what's making Hydra work really well. It gives you an additional 5% damage per mana that you consume. And so ultimately, the more mana that you can get on here, the more damage that you're going to deal, which I think is really great. But that does kind of change up the way that we do our builds. In the past, we really didn't have to worry about mana very much. The worst part was getting mana regeneration. And now we do have to also think about getting mana, which might not necessarily be a bad thing. So we did temper on Hydra damage, and we also tempered on additional Hydra heads, which is ultimately not going to actually give you more Hydra heads. It's just going to increase the size of the Hydra and also dealing more damage as well. So this is what we did for our staff. We did use Flicker Step. Of course, Flicker Step is just something that we're likely going to use almost all of the time with the Sorceress, and more specifically because it allows us to continue using our ultimate skill, which we are still getting quite a bit of damage coming out from our Inferno as well. For our pants, we did use Tybalt's. We have the opportunity to use regular pants if we wanted to. However, the 20% increased damage that we're getting from this really is great. And we're also getting some additional stats and also damage reduction while unstoppable. So I still think that this is the best way to go. And then taking a look at our gloves, this is still going to be a conjuration build. And so I did decide to test out Sid's bindings. The alternative to Sid's bindings is using a legendary item that's going to also allow you to temper on additional Hydra damage. And that potentially actually might be better. And that's something that I do plan to test when the season comes out. But for now, in order to save some time and also be able to test out some of the other characters, I am going to just kind of skip through this. But we did use Sid bindings for this build. And then, of course, we are using Shroud of False Death. Thanks to Inferno pulling in enemies, we don't necessarily need to use Raiment of the Infinite. So we did have the opportunity to use Shroud of False Death. This is the first time I've ever found a 4GA item, but unfortunately, it is just the test realm. So in my opinion, it really doesn't mean anything at all. And also, I didn't spend any time going through the mythic caches. I just picked, it was maybe 2 or 3, and that was pretty much it. And so hopefully that means we'll see more mythics with 4GAs in the actual season itself, but I highly doubt it. For the runes, we did use Nagu and Thul. We are constantly using summonings with this build, and so naturally it makes sense that we also use a rune to accommodate it. It seems like the Mystical Frost Nova was going off quite frequently with this, and so that's probably something I'll be taking into the actual season as well. Next up, we did use Shaco with this build. Now, of course, as usual, we do need that incredible cooldown reduction with this, and the +4 to all ranks does not hurt either. You could use a regular helmet with this. You could probably use a Godslayer's helmet with this. And I also was seeing people were using the Veil of Verglass as well, which is something that also could be helpful. It still has cooldown reduction, which is great, and can also give you up to 100% more damage. But personally, I prefer to keep Shaco. Like I said, it allows me to teleport faster. It allows me to use Inferno a little bit faster. It just makes sense to me. Now, for the runes for this one, we did use Sir and Cax. Feel like that one is pretty self-explanatory, so I'll go ahead and move on over to our amulet. We are using the Ophidian Iris. This is what's making the Hydra build work altogether. It is giving us an incredible amount of pyromancy damage. We are getting some Devouring Blaze from this as well, which is great. But once we have more than 3 heads, it gives us up to 95% increased damage, which really is the only way to go if you're planning on using a Hydra build. And of course, because this is a Hydra build, it only makes sense to use a Horadric Jewel that accommodates our summons as well. And so this one empowers our summons and allows them to grow larger, dealing an additional 30% damage, which is really good. Next up, for our ring, we are using the Storm Swell aspect with our ring. Now, the reason we're not using a mythic ring with this is because A, we're getting some Inferno cooldown reduction with this, which is going to be really helpful for us, and B, we are also getting Hydra damage with this as well. Now, what's absolutely wild about this item specifically is when I went to go enchant it so that I can change vulnerable damage to something else that's going to be more useful for us, it instead only allowed me to enchant my Hydra damage. So it went from like 80% up to 105%, which is great. Now, I don't think that this is supposed to be happening. I don't think we're supposed to be able to enchant something that we've tempered on and try to make it stronger. I mean, it's not a terrible idea, but at the same time, it's not something that I believe was intended to happen. And on top of that, after that did happen, then I was no longer able to masterwork this item up at all. And so it could either be a trade-off or it could be another one of the 1,000 different glitches that I experienced as I tried out the PTR. Nonetheless, when the actual season comes around, we'll go ahead and mess around with it, and hopefully they will have fixed all of those bugs. Next up, we are using Tall Rushes with this as well. I don't think we're ever going to not have Tall Rushes on our build. It's just too good to not have. And of course, getting one that had cooldown reduction on there was really difficult to do. And when I finally did get one, as you can see, masterworking did not work in my favor. Nonetheless, we still did get a pretty good idea of how it's going to perform. Now then, for our Horadric Spellcraft, we are using the Smoldering Ember for our primary. Now, Smoldering Ember is giving us a lot more burning damage, and this is a burning build overall, so it is really helpful to have. I was noticing some people are also using the Glacial Nimbus, and really the only purpose of having this is just so that it can deal additional chill and potentially also freeze enemies as well. Because our Mystical Frost Nova is going off pretty frequently with our runes, I don't think that this is really valuable for us. The one that's going to give us more damage output is going to be the Smoldering Ember. For the actual powers themselves, we are using Disintegrate. Disintegrate seems to be triggering more frequently, or at least it seems to be impacting more enemies at once. Therefore, it is going to be giving us a boost a little bit more frequently. The other one I did try was the Celestial Surge. This one was not triggering very frequently, and so it's not going to be quite as useful for us. However, if I can be completely honest, with all of these Horadric powers that we have for this season, I'm not excited about this at all. This is pretty lame, especially coming off of a season where you can see these boss powers. They look really great. You can physically see them taking down enemies pretty frequently. It just was really, really cool to play and really, really fun to see. Whereas here, if you're using something like Celestial Surge, you might not even notice that it's happening, which is really frustrating. And same thing with Disintegrate. Basically just triggers a line between the point of where it started and yourself, so you can move around in order to impact other enemies around you. But like I said, when it comes down to the way that it looks and feels, it just does not look very great. And coming off of a season where the boss powers were just absolutely amazing, I'm just not impressed with this at all. It is cool that you can kind of customize this a little bit and you can choose from a bunch of different options in the way that you want to build your build. I do like the customizable options. However, even with these options that we're getting down here, it's just not great. So this is something that hopefully Blizzard will get a chance to rework a little bit and make a little bit more fun, or at least more visibly pleasing. But at this point, like I said, these powers are probably my least favorite from all of the seasons that we've had before, with the exception of the season of Construct. That was just a complete disaster. Now then, for our secondary powers, we are using Fractured Cord with this. It is really helpful to have the damage resistant effects go away for a short period of time where we can take down our enemies. As I mentioned before, this is a shatter reliant build, and so any one-on-one targets that we're dealing with or anything that's got that resistance aura to boost others is really going to hinder us significantly and slow us down a lot. So it is helpful to have that. The other one we're using is Siphoning Gizmo. This is going to take our damage over time effects and deal 100% of their damage instantly, which kind of makes damage over time not damage over time anymore. And with that said, why do we have damage over time if we need to use things that make an instant effect? That just doesn't really make sense to me. It makes it seem like Blizzard is aware that damage over time is inferior, yet still we're not really doing anything about it to fix it. A little bit disappointing. And then lastly, we are also using Tranquil Stone with this. Tranquil Stone grants us Unstoppable. Now, we are already using Flame Shield with this, and Flame Shield does already grant Unstoppable for us. However, there are a few seconds of downtime that we have without Flame Shield, and during that time, this Tranquil Stone should be really helpful and pick up that Unstoppable that we need. You probably could use this build without Flame Shield, but in order to make sure that we're tanky and we're not dying, we are still going to use it. If you decide to use something else, you probably could use Ice Plates to help with your cooldowns if you're struggling with that. But since we're using Shaco, ours is good right now. And then really quickly, just to take a look at our skill tree. So we, as usual, are just going to take whatever we need just so that we can make it down to our core skills. For our core skills, we are using Fireball for our enchantment because, again, we are using Shatter. This is just going to help with that additional explosive damage that we're dealing to our enemies. So we'll take Fireball up to Enhanced Fireball, and then we'll grab Greater Fireball. And this is what allows us to execute enemies when they're below 25% life, making it a little bit quicker for us to get through the pit. We also are taking Devastation this time around. We need as much mana as we can in order to maximize on our Serpentine aspect on our staff. And so we did take 3 points into this. And we also took 3 points into Elemental Dominance. Since our Hydra is considered a core skill, this additional 16% increased damage is also going to be helpful for us too. For our defensive skills, we are taking 1 point into Teleport. We're going to take it up to Enhanced Teleport, and then we're going to finish it up with Mystical Teleport, just so that we can generate some additional crackling energy to take advantage of some additional damage here. We've got 3 points into Glass Cannon. We're taking Ice Armor for 1 point, taking it down to Enhanced Ice Armor, and of course we are going to take Mystical Ice Armor for some additional attack damage as well. Moving on down to our conjuration skills, we are taking Hydra. This is a Hydra build after all. And like I mentioned, this is now considered a core skill as well, which is really great so that we can take advantage of our core buffs. We are going to use Enhanced Hydra, and we're going to finish it up with Roaring Hydra. And then we will take 1 point into Align the Elements, and we're going to take 2 points into Protection. We've got 3 points into Primordial Binding, and we've also got 3 points into Mana Shield. Lastly, for our conjurations, we're taking 1 point into Familiar. We're going to take it over to Enhanced Familiar, and we're finishing this up with Invoked Familiar. And then for our mastery skills, we're just going to be taking 3 points into Inner Flames. Moving on down to our ultimate skills, as usual, we are going to grab our nice Frost trio here. So we've got Permafrost, we've got Icy Touch, and we've also got Hoarfrost. We're going to put 3 points into Hoarfrost and Permafrost, but we did need that additional 1 point from Icy Touch that we took away. So for now, we just have 2 points in here. We also will be using Inferno. We've got 5 points into Inferno for the additional cooldown and also for additional damage. We've got Prime Inferno, and then we've got Supreme Inferno as well. Then we've got our fire trio here, which is going to be Endless Fire for 3 points. We've got 1 point into Warmth and 3 points into Soulfire. On the right-hand side, we're also going to be taking 3 points into Elemental Synergies and 3 points into Evocation. And then last but not least, we are going to finish it up with Shatter. Now, if you do not want to play the Shatter version, that is absolutely fine. You can. Like I mentioned, I was able to get up to Pit Tier 95 and complete it. It was a little bit of a struggle, but I was able to do it without. Instead of using Shatter, you can take it off and you can put it into Enlightenment, where you'll need to change a couple of things around in addition to that as well. Like our enchantment, we probably would take off Fireball at that point and likely replace it for another Hydra for some additional damage. However, for now, since we are using Shatter, we're going to be leaving it like this. And then to quickly go through our Paragon board, for our first board, we took Tactician. And then for our second board, we make our way on up, where we're going to be using Fundamental Release, and this is being paired up with Torch. And then we're going to make our way on over to the left-hand side where we're going to be taking the Burning Instinct board. And this one we're going to be pairing up with the Pyromaniac Glyph. Going up to the top right, we're going to be taking the Ceaseless Conduit board. And this one is being paired up with Flame Feeder. And then finally, last but not least, for our fifth board, we are going to be taking Enchantment Master. And we're going to be pairing this one up with Elementalist. And keep in mind, this is still a huge work in progress. I kind of quickly rushed through this and put together something just so that I can kind of test this out. I used the core of my Inferno build from the last season to really kind of come up with this so I don't spend too much time here. However, there are a lot of changes to be made. I also plan to mess around with the Conjurer Glyph as well. That one gives us up to 500% additional conjuration damage and really could end up making or breaking the build as well. So there's still a lot to play around with, but as it stands right now, Hydra is looking pretty good. Minus the fact that we're reliant on the shatter effect. Hopefully there will be changes that will be made to fix that up for the next season, but this is kind of where we stand. With that said, the last but not least, we'll take a look at our Mercenary. As usual, we're taking Subo, and this one we decided to go down to Incendiary Bolt just so that we can have some additional burning damage. Again, this is a burning build after all. And for our enforcement, we are using Aldkin. And as usual, Aldkin is going to be using his Field of Languish. And this is going to trigger anytime we are casting Fireball. That's all I have for you guys for today. I am planning on messing around with the other builds a little bit as well. I may end up posting 1 or 2 more videos on the PTR over the next week or so, so be sure to stay tuned for that. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below. Let me know what you guys' thoughts are on the Hydra build. Until next time, Wanderers.